So who here is a student of communications? We got one person brave enough to raise their hand. Anyone else? Come on, it's the largest major on campus. All right, oh, we've got another one. 2 in the whole church? Anyone ever take a communications course? All right, Daniel back there. Anyone else? All right. So we have a few here, right? I thought we'd have a bigger crowd to start the hum. One of the most important aspects of good communications, strategic or otherwise, you gotta know who you're talking to. You have to know who your audience is. Because if you don't know who you're talking to, it's really hard to communicate effectively to them. They may not get your point. Well, that seems obvious for us anyway. But what happens, especially as we try to understand the gospel passage that we heard, what we have to do, rather than thinking about who are we communicating to, we've got to turn the question around a little bit and wonder, who is Jesus talking to? Why is he seemingly uncharacteristic in how harsh and how tough he's being? Why would he offer such a strong warning that you will be cast out, and the phrase wailing and gnashing of teeth? Who's he talking to that he is offering this message rather than the familiar message of love, mercy, and openness? What's going on? Well, here's the story. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. We know this is his final journey. He's going to Jerusalem. It's about to be Palm Sunday. That's where he's going. But as he's on his way, nearing the city, there were many communities of people, devoutly religious people of Jesus' day, who knew that they had the special position of being God's chosen people. There's one problem. They took that understanding of being God's chosen people and they went way too far with it, because they were under the impression that as the chosen people of God, they were special, unique, set apart, beloved by God more than anyone else, and as a result, everyone else was hated by God. They thought they were the special ones. They were better than everyone else, and everyone else was rejected or condemned by God. That's the reason they asked Jesus the question, will only a few be saved? Because they're hoping that Jesus will say to them, yep, only a few. Oh, and you're it. They wanted Jesus to affirm their own self-righteousness, their own sense of superiority, their own sense of expanded importance, thinking that they're better than everyone else. And Jesus says to them, no, actually it's just the opposite. You're in some pretty serious moral trouble because of your attitude around who the kingdom of God is meant for. They thought it was just for them. Because the kingdom of God was meant for the entire world, Jesus says to them, you better try to enter through the narrow gate. And anytime Jesus talks about a narrow path or a narrow gate or the eye of the needle, what he's really saying is all of that extra baggage, that spiritual and emotional baggage that you're carrying around, you better get rid of that because you can't fit through the door. You better let go of all those attitudes that you hold on to, thinking that you are superior and better to others, and that God rejects everyone because you assume yourself to be favored, chosen, and better. This is why Jesus offers the incredibly harsh and demanding critique to those who ask, will only be a few saved? Because he's warning them that unless they change their attitudes about salvation, they themselves might be left out. Because the kingdom that God meant to bring was intended for everyone. Because as soon as he was done rebuking them, what did he say? He echoed the words that we heard in the prophet Isaiah in the first reading. He said that when God's kingdom comes, People from the north and the south, from the east and the west will be gathered to that kingdom. People and lands and nations and tribes of every part of this world will be drawn to God. That the kingdom was intended for everyone, not just a select few, not just a few who think of themselves better or holier than everyone else, but in fact, Jesus takes the moral understanding of his day and completely flips it upside down. And so for us, we who believe ourselves to be in the kingdom, this really ought to challenge us. Because we cannot fall into that sense of spiritual superiority nor self-righteousness that the crowd fell into today. We have to allow this passage to challenge us so that we no longer think of just ourselves as the better version of God's chosen people. We have to maintain this attitude that Isaiah had and that Jesus uses. That the kingdom that God intends is a kingdom for everyone. Now I know that some of you here have been world travelers. So maybe you've had a shot at bringing the message of God's kingdom to all corners of the world. I see people here, a lot of folks who were abroad last semester. It's good to welcome you back. But here's the thing, you're here now. So I think the other challenge that we're confronted with today is that we have to bring this message to the four corners of this spot where we find ourselves. That rather than necessarily worrying about what's miles and thousands of miles away, how about we try to bring this open message, this message that Jesus' kingdom is intended for everyone. How about we try to bring that to the four corners of this campus? Let's just start there. Because I cannot tell you how many times I have heard from students that somewhere along the lines they were told by someone else that because they're doing the normal college thing, you know what I'm talking about, right? The normal college activities, you know, what happens on a Saturday night, because that they've done that, someone told them, you're not wanted anymore at church. They don't want you. They're not interested in you. You don't fit in anymore. And so frequently, our brothers and sisters right here on campus, they hear the wrong message. They hear the message of the crowd that Jesus rebukes. That unless you think of yourself as better than everyone else, you don't fit in. Unless you think of yourself as perfect, you don't belong. In fact, we are the ones who are confronted with the challenge to bring this message to everyone. That it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. You're still wanted. You're still welcome. This is what it is to be a Christian. Please don't ever forget that Jesus was thought of as a close friend to sinners and drunkards. How about we are too? I mean, think about it. What happened last night on campus? You know, Saturday night parties. We need to be just like Jesus, bringing this message to wherever we find ourselves led. We have to be willing to let others know with a sense of love and joy, with a sense of excitement, that everyone is welcome. Not as some self-righteous preacher, but as an honest, loving, compassionate person who knows the joy of the gospel, who knows we aren't special because we are in the kingdom, but rather we are challenged to share the kingdom with the rest of the world. The whole point of the gospel is that Jesus takes the moral order of his world, those who thought themselves holier than others, and he flips it upside down. And he says, no, you're actually required to do more, to be a greater servant to others. You're the ones who are supposed to go out and gather people into my kingdom. Because you're already here. You're in the kingdom. And so he summarizes everything with that famous line. The last will be first. And the first, if you're not careful, may be last. This is how the kingdom of God works. We must live our lives inviting everyone to it and always treating everyone as if the kingdom is open to them.